is perfect. You look great. Hi, everybody. It's Caroline Leavitt. I'm the co-founder of A Mighty Blaze. And the Mighty Blaze, as you know, was started the day of lockdown as a way to connect writers with indie bookstores, with readers. And it's especially appropriate because today we're going to be talking to Susan Straight and her amazing book, Sacrament, which is really one of my favorite books of the year. I've just been raving about it to everybody. I gave it to raving people. I've been telling everybody you have to read this book, and you do. So what's going to happen here is that if you will all look on the right-hand side, there's a column, a chat. Susan, you don't have to do anything about this. This is just for if anybody has questions for Susan or comments, put them in the chat and I will recite them out loud and Susan can answer them. And we want everybody to buy their books at independent bookstores because it's so, so important. So either buy Sacrament and any of Susan's books at your favorite indie, or we've given you a link right in the chat that says bookshop.org, which you can do that. Okay, so I'm totally excited for this. I have been following Susan Straight's work probably since she was in kindergarten. She's the author of 9 novels, including Mecca, A Million Nightingales, Highwire Moon, and 1 memoir, In the Country of Woman. She's been a finalist for the Kirkus Prize, the Dayton Literary Peace Prize. She's a Guggenheim Fellow, and she was up for the National Book Award. She received the Robert Kirsch Award for Lifetime Achievement from the LA Times. And she also is the Distinguished Professor of Creative Writing at the University of California, Riverside. Sacrament is set in August 2020 at the height of a COVID surge, but it's not a COVID novel per se. Like most of the COVID novels I've been reading have been about wealthy people in their apartments, usually in New York City, or, they're having to be separate from loved ones. This is very different. This is actually a book about heroism and community. It's about traveling nurses who live in an RV next to the hospital, and they're taking care of patients in critical condition during COVID. There's one Lorette who sings to patients in comas so they won't feel alone. There's Marisol who takes care of fellow nurses as well as patients. And it's also about their teenage kids. And it's also a love story, actually featuring one of my favorite characters, Johnny Frias, the chip officer from Susan's novel Mecca. Okay, so I want to say welcome, Susan Straight. I want to show everybody this gorgeous, haunting cover. Susan, you have no idea how thrilled I am to have you here. I'm reading.
You know what I'm going to say, that I liked your work since your very first novel, and you know that, right?
Yeah.
I never go near a garbage disposal because of you, okay?
That is so wonderful. So I can't wait to talk to you. So let's just run some of the rave reviews. This novel is just going through the roof. Consistently brilliant, Meredith Moran, LA Times, Washington Post, a rare novel that deepens the human drama of COVID. And from me, a monumentally moving reminder that heroism and humanity persist even in the midst of chaos. Kirkus Review, starred, astonishing. Straight reminds us of where we have been and where we're going without once looking away. Publishers Weekly, it's a vibrant novel. So I have so much to ask you. The first question, I hate when people ask questions like, well, where do you get your ideas? Because, if writers knew, we'd be producing book after book. The question that I really like better is, what was sort of haunting you that made you take up your computer or your typewriter to think, you know what, I think I want to write about this?
That is a good question, because haunting is the perfect word. I mean, I finished Mecca, and Mecca kind of ended on an uncertain note, as many of my readers emailed me. first of all, they were like, why can't Johnny Frias have a woman? And I'm like, okay. And they're like, can he please fall in love? I was going to write about Johnny Frias again because I've been writing about him since 2008. And I was haunted by the idea of him being on the freeways in California and finding people whose abandoned cars because, they had COVID and they got picked up.
Right.
And
Oh, God.
yeah, so that was one thing. But the other thing, now that you have me thinking about it, is, I mean, my ex-husband almost died of COVID. My next door neighbor, Mario Soria, was in the first 100 people in Riverside County to get COVID. He got COVID on March 17th, and no one really knew what COVID was. Those are big men, and all these big male friends of mine. I mean, my neighbor, Jim Calderon, died in his house of COVID.
Oh, no.
And he was a big guy, a groundskeeper. He already had diabetes. And I was haunted by how alone they were in the hospital because with Mario, with my ex-husband, like it was nurses who FaceTimed us. And I just kept thinking how hard it was for them to do their jobs with all that PPE. They'd have all these layers and layers of protective equipment. And then they were FaceTiming me. I'd have a specific appointment so that they could tell me. And then they would show me, my loved one. And I thought they're doing this all day. And it was very haunting to think of how they had to move through the world like that, right?
Yeah, exactly. I also wanted to ask you about, as soon as I knew that this novel was about nurses, I wanted it because I know from personal experiences that nurses are really the angels in the hospital. They truly care in a way that doctors just cannot due to their constraints or whatever else. But I never knew that there were traveling nurses. Can you tell us about them?
Yes, I that was the other big impetus. There were two things that made me actually just sit down and start. Like I was done with Mecca. I was wondering like, what am I going to do next? I wasn't quite ready to leave the world. And Lorette, who's a character in Mecca, she has had COVID and she's an ICU nurse. But Caroline, I live 3 blocks from the hospital where I was born, the community hospital. So my neighborhood is full of nurses, EMTs, like radiologists, and then a lot of people who do respiratory therapy. Also, my neighborhood is full of contractors. My neighbor Mario that got COVID, he installs the giant heating and air conditioning units in cell phone towers. He has a truck with a crane, and that's what he does all day. And so those guys were out there doing their thing. And I have other neighbors, Jose Hernandez. He works days at Cisco warehouse and nights at Petco warehouse. So COVID was a big deal, but the traveling nurses came to live on our block.
I love it. I love it.
So Tom and Hammy, my neighbors who are already nurses, and then on the next block, there's 2 nurses. On the next block, there's 2 nurses. But people were not renting out, but they were donating their RVs. And they would park RVs in front of their house because the traveling nurses came from, on my block, Carrie was from Texas, Pam was from Indiana. On the next block, South Carolina and Georgia, and then someone came from Minnesota. So these women would all walk by my house, Carrie and Pam, every night at 6 o'clock. They would walk by my house on their way to the hospital for 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift. And I would talk to them like every night. It was something.
I love that.
Rice Krispie treat bars, but the most important thing about those traveling nurses is that they were from far away. And so like Pam had left her son behind. He was 5 and he really missed her. And so she would FaceTime with him. She would say, here's Susan, here are her sunflowers, here's her dog Angel, because I have a big black fuzzy dog. And now I'm walking by her house and I'm going to work and I miss you. And that just really stuck with me because the traveling nurses left their families behind. And so the irony that I was writing about is that Lorette and Charisse live in San Bernardino.
Right.
But they go stay in the RVs because they don't want to infect their kids.
Yes, exactly. That was one of the things that I thought was the most moving because one of them has a teenage daughter who she misinterprets. She thinks that her mother is so busy that she doesn't want to spend time with her when actually her mother is desperate to protect her out of love. Yeah. And that was part of the tragedy of Chaos, where here she is a nurse taking care of other people who have COVID, and while trying to protect her daughter, while putting herself on the front lines of getting that disease as well.
It
It
was
was
15, right, girl? I mean, when you're 15, you're nothing your mom said.
right. No, I remember 15. No, you're right. I want to talk about San Bernardino. You've been called, LA Times actually called you the Bard of Overlooked California. I love that word overlooked because that it's inherent in that word is that there's something interesting there. There's something fascinating there that should not be overlooked. So I want to know, what is it about these forgotten communities that draws you? What do you want people to know that they don't know about living where you live?
I mean, that's the funny part for us is because we don't think we're forgotten because we've been here all this time and we just
Right.
like I got dressed up for you and I thought you were gonna be like, that shirt is too fancy, but tonight I go dancing at the Riverside Elks Lodge down the street with my girlfriend. And, we're gonna have Mexican candy shots like the ones, and a bunch of my friends are nurses there or home health care aides, and so yeah, like it's funny because we don't feel overlooked or forgotten, but I do realize always, because I went to the East Coast for graduate school, and someone told me, several people, and you might have heard this when you were younger too, like, well, you can't be a writer unless you live in New York. And I was like,
oh yeah, no.
Like, but they don't have tacos in New York because this was like 80s. They don't have Mexican food, and my family's. So for me, Riverside, San Bernardino, our two counties have 5 million people, and
that's a lot.
Well, geographically, Riverside and San Bernardino counties together are larger than 9 American states. So it's this huge place, and part of the novel takes place in Coachella, which everyone knows Coachella, the music
festival.
But Coachella Valley is this ancient, gorgeous landscape, and the people that my married family, somebody was married into the Torres Martinez reservation, but also my mom is from Switzerland. She's from like the coldest Alps. So she used to take us to the date gardens when we were kids, and it would be like 120 degrees, and my mom would be like, this is the best thing ever.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Growing up, and she thought the dates themselves were fascinating. So writing about Coachella and using the word Coachella, but it's oasis and thermal, where people actually live. I loved writing about the date gardens. That's one of my favorite landscapes in the world. And I don't know, I think there's beauty in this place. And also there's us. And like I said, when I go tonight, I'll see everybody I've known since childhood, and we still never get tired of talking to each other. And it's how America is, though. People don't realize it, but when I used to drive across the country with my dog, and I would stop in like Walcott, Iowa, and I would go eat at like a diner, and everyone knew each other. And then they'd be like telling me stories about their grandparents. And America is still full of all of places like ours, right?
I think so too. I can remember going to Jefferson, East Texas on a book tour, really tiny little town, but everyone talked to everybody else. And it was so lovely. That's how community is built, which brings us to the title, Sacrament. Okay, sacrament is a state of grace, but it's also almost like a religious word. I think it's the perfect word for this novel because to me it feels like all of these people, there's death and destruction moving around them, there's COVID, but there's such grace in all of these characters. Was Sacrament always the title?
No, I'm really bad at titles. In fact, when I was in graduate school, so my 3 people and I was already married, and I was only like 22, and I'm in graduate school at Amherst, and my professors on my thesis committee were James Baldwin, Jane Nugaborn, and Julius Lester. And I'll never forget, Julius Lester said, "You're the worst person at titles I've ever met," because I called the book like Darnell, like whatever the name of the person was. And Jane Nugaborn actually gave me Flannery O'Connor's collection, Everything That Rises Must Converge, and I had never read Flannery O'Connor. And so I learned a lot from her titles. Like you have a beautiful confluence, or you have one word, like Revelation.
One word.
And I'm also a big Toni Morrison fan, of course, and like Sula is my favorite book.
Right.
And it's just such a beautiful word. But Caroline, I never figure out the title till I'm done. Never.
That's incredible. My titles are always changed. Always.
So Mecca was funny because part of the book took place in Mecca, but it was also just this notion that everyone was on the freeways. But Lorette and her son were in that book too. Dante, her 13-year-old son, who is a big character in Sacrament, he wants to be an astronomer, which is funny because my friends are always like, wait, you got a character that wants to be an astrologist? And I'm like, no, an astronomer. They're like, what? Yeah, an astrologist. What is he going to do? Say Virgo, Capricorn. Like, and I'm like, no, it's the stars. They're like, yeah, the stars. Dante's ideas about constellations actually led me to believe that like everyone can be, in Mecca if we're all in the same place. But for this book, it's a little bit more that I was writing about what it's like for all of these people to be separated from their loved ones at that moment of death. And so I will be honest with you. This picture right here is my stepdad who raised me, and he was watching my 3 girls this night. And during just before COVID, I helped my real father die, my natural father. He died of the flu in 2018. And so then my stepdad died of Parkinson's, not of COVID, but May of 2021. And so being there with them, like with their bodies as they were passing away, that is, it's a different feeling, but you get to say goodbye. But my brother, my only like full brother, I have 11 siblings, but only one. And he died violently when he was 38. He was on the way to my house. He was 3 blocks away. And I never got to say goodbye to him. I never got to see him again. I didn't even get to see his body. And that has haunted me. Like, I miss my brother in a very haunting way. So
Right.
the sacrament of just being with someone is what took away from us. And so I couldn't think of the right title at all. And then one day I was looking at my brother, this picture of my brother, and I thought, that's what it is. Like, I never got that moment with him. So Lorette sings to these patients, and I was able to write about what it's like to like watch somebody's soul leave their body, because I have done that. But inhabiting it in fiction, as you know better than anyone, it's different. And this feeling was that I wanted to honor not just the nurses, but all those family members.
Yes.
My dad couldn't even be cremated for like 3 weeks because it was during COVID. And I just think about all the people who were waiting to see their loved ones again, and they couldn't see them again.
It's incredible. I always thought that, I wrote down in my notes, Sacrament is really a love story. And I think it is, because it's about the bonds we have, and it's about all kinds of love. And there really is a kind of grace in being with somebody when they're leaving this world and going to wherever they're going. I mean, I just really felt I just loved the way you wove love and honor and grace into a story that could have been, just about death and destruction. I mean, these women were so completely heroic, so completely heroic.
It's so nice to say it, though, because that's exactly what I thought about it, is that it's not a story about death and destruction, which is my kids always. I raised 3 daughters by myself since the youngest one was 1, and they're all in their 30s now, and I have a grandkid. And sometimes they used to call me 5 or 6 years ago when I was anemic and feeling bad, and they'd be like, so what's it like today? And I'm like, death and destruction, death and destruction. There's so many friends who were passing away, And
I know, it's terrible. It was a terrifying time.
But for me, the 3 love stories, like Lorette and Grief, they've never not gotten along, and he's upset with her for leaving, and she's keeping things from him. She doesn't want to tell him, and we don't tell our husbands. Our husbands don't tell their wives. We tell our friends. We tell our girlfriends. We tell our sisters. I'll tell my sisters-in-law anything, and my kids used to be like, "Why didn't you tell me that?" And I'm like, "I'm not telling you. I'm telling my sisters." So Reese and Johnny, they both had been alone for a long time. But I have to say, my favorite love story was Raquel. Raquel, the 15-year-old.
She's incredible.
And she meets Joey Ortiz. And
Yes, please.
One of the things I learned from James Baldwin so long ago was he helped me with this very early story I was working on. And he said, this is all the important things take place in the scene with Leonard. And I remember being like, Leonard, that's like a really tiny little section. But it took me 5 years after I graduated to realize that the secondary characters are what moves our plots along, right, Caroline? And like also the secondary characters in like even like our favorite shows, like, you know, I always
Yeah.
tell my students, like, I'll be like, who watched Bridesmaids? And they'll say yes. I'm like, who was the main character? And they're like, Melissa McCarthy. I'm like,
Oh no, that's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. Yeah.
so for me, the two secondary characters that mattered the most were Marisol Manalang, who like she's a badass from the Philippines, and I have a million friends like her. My neighbor across the street, Maria, from the forests of the Philippines. That's who gave me a lot of the ideas for Marisol. But my other favorite character was the truck driver who shows up, Ray.
Oh yeah.
And so like I love that Raquel felt this tenderness toward Joey Ortiz in that very teenager kind of way.
Right.
So you can't recapture that, can you? And I loved writing about them. I really
You can recapture it on the page. You can recapture it, which you did. I mean, that was my question. Tell us about Raquel. She's such a great character.
I loved Raquel. She was so hard to write, in fact, not because she was 15, but because I felt so deeply for her, because teaching virtual school during COVID, I taught, you know, my college classes, and there were huge inequities. Like some people had, you know, great backgrounds. And like for me, I could never be sitting here. I had my 2 grown daughters and my son-in-law were here during COVID. There were 4 people using the internet. My internet would go out. The dogs would bark. My neighbors would be like blasting music. It was very difficult. I don't have a fancy house. So Raquel feels so isolated in Coachella, and she also feels like everyone has a nicer room and so to me, I loved writing about her prickliness and her intellect, but she and her mom were like this, and when her mom stops calling her, she's like that's it. She just, and so the idea that she would run away was just, of course she would run away.
Of course she would. She's a teenager.
Away, as she keeps saying, I'm running home. And so I loved writing about her, and it gets dangerous there. Like that is a big deal, is that she is a runaway and it gets dangerous. And so yes, when Ray Ayala and the truck drivers show up, I had no idea that was going to happen. It was in the middle of the night, and I was like, man, Raquel's in trouble. Like, what's going to happen?
I know. I worried about her. I love teenagers. I really, it's such all your nerves are on the surface when you're a teenager. I also want us to talk about the Washington Post raved about you for writing about the long routes, in quotes, that follow the characters, where their past histories influence their presence, and their present makes them reflect on their past. Can you talk about that whole idea of the long routes? Because we're not just connected to each other. It feels to me like in Sacrament that we're connected to our past and to our predecessors.
Well, I mean, I was nervous, and I curled my hair for you and stuff, but I was so nervous because I don't have that office set up with like all my books and all that. So I got out these 4 books because I didn't know you were going to ask, but I wanted to say that I'm a big fan of Louise Erdrich. That's one of the first short stories I ever read was Scales. And Louise Erdrich's characters have always populated her novels in like many different ways. And then a character will show up. So way back, this book, Between Heaven and Here, in this book, a young woman is murdered and her body is in a shopping cart. And she is the most beautiful woman in her community. And I ended up spending 15 years writing 3 books about this young woman. There truthfully was a young woman who was killed on my father-in-law's block. And my brother-in-law and I were standing on that block a couple weeks ago. We were talking, and he's the one who found her. And so we were both remembering that. But the fictional girl, Glorette, is the descendant of formerly enslaved women and then free women from Louisiana who are of mixed race. So I wrote 3 novels. I wrote A Million Nightingales, which is set during enslavement in Louisiana, and then Take One Candlelight, Room in Between Heaven and Here. So Glorette was cousins with Lorette and Charisse. And there's a character in Mecca named Mary whose son dies. their parents are all from Louisiana, and all of these women came out here during hurricanes or for better work, and all of their daughters are connected as cousins. And that is how my neighborhood works. I mean, in my neighborhood, I had 5 kids growing up. Someone else had 8 kids. Someone else had this many kids. Every time somebody married each other, like my ex-husband's family had 6 kids, you just have this huge web of people that call me auntie.
Oh,
And
I love it. That's great.
and if they call me and they need $50, I will give them $50. There's no questions asked. So I thought it's really nice of you to ask because Lorette and Charisse lived in apartments next to each other, and their moms both came from Louisiana, and their moms were housekeepers at Our Lady, the hospital. And they always wanted their daughters to become nurses. And I think for me, growing up with so many people too, like my mom was an immigrant. She wasn't a citizen until I was 4. She wanted to vote for John F. Kennedy because she thought he was really good looking. from Vin Scully doing Dodger broadcasts, which is a very Southern California thing. But my mom didn't get to graduate from high school, and neither did my dad. So all of the hopes and dreams of those 2 nurses were on their daughters. And so I think Charisse and Lorette have this background too, and Charisse's mom disappeared. I'm writing about the disappearance of Charisse's mom in the next book. So for me, it's lovely that you asked because I have characters that show up,
I love that. It keeps them alive.
Yeah, I do. Because I still think of them always as real people, and something will come up and I'll be like, oh, that's why Charisse was upset because her mom passed away. Her mom left. And then I'm like, okay, what happened to her mom? So that's the one I'm working on.
Oh, I love that. I absolutely love that. I haven't mentioned the writing of Sacrament, which is, it's so immersive, Susan. It's just, you're in that world. You believe in these people. I would stop reading and it would be like somebody had turned on lights suddenly or turned them off suddenly because I was pulled out of that world and I couldn't wait to go back. I mean, I still think about those characters. So what I want to know is, I'm always interested in how writers write. I mean, do you have a routine, or do you just write when you can, or how do you do it?
Death and destruction. No, I mean, I always wrote in a notebook. I remember I did an interview for the LA Times a long time ago. I wrote an essay about my writing, and it was shared so widely because so many women were like, yeah, like we don't have a writing time. And never met Philip Roth but I remember hearing an interview on NPR with Philip Roth, and he was like, I wake up, before the sun rises, and I stand at I think he had a podium that he wrote at. He stood up, and then he's like, I have my first cup of coffee as the sun rises, and then I write for 6 hours. And I'm like, man, I used to be a waitress. I'm not trying to stand for 6 hours, right? Like, stand up for 6 hours? No. So then, but I thought, but he has a routine, and I never had a routine, girl, never, because I had 3 kids.
That's right.
I moved into this house in 1988. I got pregnant 2 weeks later. I had a job teaching. I taught ESL. I taught at Job Corps, but I've always taught. And my husband worked graveyard shift at a correctional institution. So I wrote at night. I always wrote at night. And I wrote by hand forever. I had a little typewriter, but now I still write on the legal pad, and I still have to write everywhere because I take care of my mom who's 90. She'll be 91 next month.
Oh, how wonderful.
If she's at the hospital, which she is, I'm still writing. I can write in the bleachers. I can write in the car. I can write while watching my grandson. The first picture my kids took of me is that I'm holding my newborn grandson on the couch in Oakland, and I have a legal pad, and I'm literally working on the story of Charisse's mom. And my kids took a picture, and they're like, oh my God, look at mom. So I'm saying, like, I still write by hand, and I think that's the way that it comes out of my brain. And then I work at night. I can't write in the day usually anyway. And at night,
it's too busy. It sounds like.
And I got so used to writing at night that if I could write in the day, I probably couldn't do it. So, but I love what you said because I read that way too. So right now I'm reading Indian Horse by Richard Wagamese, which is this astonishing novel from Milkweed. And it came out a long time ago, but I can only read 5 pages at a time because I find myself so overwhelmed.
Yeah, it's so real.
I'm feeling for these characters. And then I always have like 2 books going. I'm reading Michael Connelly's new uh, police procedural set on Catalina Island, and I'm enjoying like the Catalina Island landscape. But I guess I read like you. Like there's some times when I'm reading a novel that I love, and I just feel like I'm in a different world, and I feel grateful that I still
I
care
love it.
about that. Like that is it for me. Like I do love watching TV, but it's not like reading.
It's not the same thing. It's not the same zone up.
Like that. We came up reading, and that's how. And my oldest daughter is the same. When she's a big reader. My other 2, my youngest one works for reality TV, which is interesting. She works on
that's great.
She worked on Below Deck for years. She's a story producer, so she does that. My middle kid's a museum curator in photography, but my oldest kid is also a museum curator, but she's the one. We have to be reading a novel always.
I want to know, what's the best advice that you give your students about being a writer, and what's the worst advice you've ever been given yourself about being a writer?
Well, the worst advice would be that I had to live in New York to be.
Oh, that's baloney. That's terrible.
Writer. But no, the best advice I give my students, and I give it to I teach, so we have a creative writing major at UCR. So right now I have 30 undergrads that are creative writing. And then we have our graduate students. But I say the same thing to both of them. I always tell them that, like, you mean nothing. And they're like, what? And it's so hard for them because they keep trying to control the story, right? And so especially when they're working on genre and fantasy, and I'm like, okay, but you're so obsessed with the plot that you're not even thinking like, but why you're doing this? And they're like, well, because I want this to happen. I'm like, it's not about you. It's about your characters. And they're like, what? And I'm like, you mean nothing. And then I'll always find like someone who's been in the class before. I'll be like, Savannah. And Savannah will be like, you mean nothing. She's just going to keep saying it over and over because I never write about myself. I don't. I mean, I wrote a memoir and that was hard. I'm not trying to do that again. I think, yes, when I'm writing about Lorette helping Stan Early pass away and singing to him, I was thinking about helping my father pass away, but that's different, as you know. And I always tell them, if you're going to write fiction, you matter so little. It's the characters that matter. And so I tell them, walk around and like look at a tree and be like, if I were 80, my character's 82, how are they going to look at this sycamore tree? Now, how is a 5-year-old going to look at the sycamore tree? But like, you have to look at everything through your character's eyes. That's the best advice I can give you. And it's hard. They're like, it's hard. But it's my story. I'm like, it's not your story. I said, it's your story if you're writing an autobiography. But especially those of my students, many of them are writing romantasy and genre. I'm like, it's all about the world building. And you haven't taken the time to like build the world yet because you're so worried about the plot. And I tell you what, by the time we get to the end of the class, they're like, you're totally right. Like, it was so much better just to walk around and be like, so what does the world look like? I'm like, stop worrying and get off your phone and just be in your character. Be in your character for a while. So that's the best advice.
Great advice. That's great advice. I have one last question. I saw that you got your drawing in the New York Times interview in the book review. Where they interviewed you about the book.
I saw it yesterday. I saw it last night. Yes.
You saw it's amazing. I want to talk to because you seem so. I talked to a lot of writers, but you seem so down to earth and so real and so authentic. Do you feel that your huge success has changed you? Because I'm not seeing it. I mean, I'm not seeing that it's changed you. I am seeing the huge success.
Don't get me at the Elks Lodge tonight. I'm going to serve dinner to 200 people. That's what we do on Friday nights. I'm going to drink my tequila drink and we're going to dance to old school. There's nothing. My kids are like, Mom will never, ever, ever. Like, I will never. My car is a 2009. My friends are lowriders. My friends are nurses. My friends are. I watch the Dodgers with my neighbor Mario, and that's just how we are. I will never change. And my mom is funny because she was really hard on me growing up, and because women couldn't do this or women couldn't do that, and it's strange because now that she has dementia, she spends the afternoons here. Like normally she's here right now. She's usually here from like, she'll be here from 2 to 4 normally. But I look at living here, everyone says to me, like, but how can you even function? Like, you live in such a working class place.
Oh,
I
that's
mean, to me, this is my homeland, and I would never. I like writing. I love writing. This is my thing. But Caroline, no one knows I'm a writer. No one knows.
I love it. I think that's wonderful. You know, I compare that in my mind with when you go into Brooklyn, where everybody's a writer, and it's kind of, it makes me really anxious.
The funny thing is, in San Francisco, there's a lot of writers too. There's a high percentage, but I did feel this way about myself, 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I was like, oh, I still am the same old school person. And it's true. Like, I'll run into people all the time, and they'll say, especially if they've moved into LA from somewhere else, and they'll be like, you don't live in LA? And I'll be like, no. And they're like, but why wouldn't you live there? I'm like, because I like parking in front of my own house, and I like my neighbor Mario. If there's a coyote in the yard, he comes out right away. And it's exactly like the book. My life is so much like Sacrament in that way. Like, there's a party at the Eagles Lodge during COVID in the book, right? And it's outside, and I can't imagine it being better because no one ever talks to me, so I can just think in my head.
That's right.
Yeah, I can come to each of my characters as nobody, and that still works the best for me. It does. And again, James Baldwin was this huge influence on me because he's the one that told me in Amherst. He said, no, it is imperative that you write about your place. He used the word imperative. I'll never forget, because it was such a beautiful multisyllabic word, and I loved it. And he said, it is imperative that you write about this place. And so I've always thought that, I think about him all the time and wish he had gotten to like see my kids. He invited me and my husband to come to France, but of course we had no car and no money, and we came straight back here, and we've been here ever since. But I wouldn't want to be anybody else. No, I feel like the luckiest person in the world to have my my community. So
I love this. I absolutely love hearing this. I want to come and hang with you. I wish I lived here. I want to go dancing with you, and I want to help serve.
Well, everyone wants to come drink at the Elks Lodge because there's this much whiskey and this much Coke. Okay.
So I just want to say, I want to show this gorgeous cover again. This book is like, it's just glorious. The cover is absolutely gorgeous. It's a painting.
I can't say enough about Counterpoint. They've done a beautiful job with the book. The book has this beautiful mystical cover and there's that small RV, and the nurses are living in what's called a mallard. It's like an 18-foot trailer. That's exactly what the nurses in my neighborhood, they were in small RVs, and here they were wearing their scrubs, and they would have their backpacks and their thermoses, and they would go by my house and in a line. And I just thought, they look like they're on a preschool line, and yet they're going to go save everybody's life, right? They're going to go save everybody's life.
Incredible. It's absolutely incredible. So I want to tell everybody here to thank you for being here. This interview is going to be also recorded. It's going to live on a Mighty Blaze YouTube channel forever. So you can rewatch it and tell your friends. Also, it's going to be an audio podcast in a few months also, so you can do that. Remember, I put the bookshop.org link up there for all of you, so you can buy the book or just go to your favorite indie bookstore. Susan, you stay, and I want to say goodbye to everybody else, and thank you so much for being here. Don't forget Sacrament by Susan Straight. It's just great. Thank you all so much. Hang tight, Susan. I'll just end this.